Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming to our session today. Any more than one is a bonus for us, so thanks for making it a real big bonus. We appreciate that very much. My name is Joe Francis. I work for GlaxoSmithKline. Leslie Crook.
I'm Leslie Crook, and I work for Perspicuity, a Microsoft Gold partner, a former GSK employee.
And hopefully today we're going to do some things. And,
I am. That's wrong.
Should I wait? Okay, better? All right, very good. So a very auspicious title, Yammer, our Yammer network helping people do more, feel better, and live longer. Well, the reality is that's the mission for GSK. As you can see here, we're a global healthcare company. We also have consumer healthcare products, and we make vaccines to help various different ailments. So the company itself, that's what our motto is, and that's what we do with the products that we make. And as an IT guy, what I have to do is get out of the way and make sure they can do that. So, not saying Yammer does that, but I am saying Yammer helps. And so what we're going to do today is kind of give you a little bit of the journey that we've gone through, that GSK's gone through, that Leslie helped us do, and give you maybe some tips, maybe some hints to do, not do, or things just to think about. So it's an 8-year journey. You know, it's almost like the Star Trek thing. We've been on a journey for a long time. And some of the things we found worked, and some of the things we wish we found would have worked better. It just didn't happen at the time. So hopefully you get that, and we will have time for questions today. So happy to take as many as we have time for. At GSK, Yammer started as a disruptive computing experiment. It just so happened we, like many companies, use college interns as part of staffing the workforce, if you will. And so they were challenged by one of our VPs to come up with a new way of communicating. So this was back in 2009. So these students, they came up and said, hey, look, we found this Yammer thing back in 2009, so let's try it. So literally it was the free version. Everybody probably went through the free version at one point. You just put your email address in and bang, you're off. So it worked. It worked in that people used it. Not extensively, but definitely conversations were happening. And it was started out just with that IP community, that our students community. But then it did grow. But what we found out is that in Yammer, it was really just looked at as an IT spot. It's just where the geeks went, and they talked about things about computers or the network. So various parts of the business started saying, hey, they're doing it, why can't we do it? So they started doing their own social networks. And so after a couple of years, it turned out that you had Yammer, which was kind of being used, and you had another solution in R&D that was being used, and another solution in our facilities area that was being used, and another one that corporate was trying to spin up, which was not used but kind of used. It was more of an ideation platform. So these were all things that were happening, but what it really meant to us was that it works, and it's something that we should invest in, something that we should take on. And as a result, our organization, the organization that I'm in, we did a bit of a reorganization and created a team that was focused on making enterprise social happen for GSK. How do we go about doing that? Well, we followed the typical IT approach. We found out what the requirements were and figured out ways that we could meet those requirements. We identified a stakeholder. Probably the smartest thing we ever did was identify a business stakeholder, not an IT stakeholder. In our case, it was the VP of corporate comms. She was really, really behind the endeavor, and she had the backing of our CEO at the time. The problem was she wasn't an actor. She was a supporter, and that came back to bite us a little bit later. we did look at the marketplace. So yeah, we had Yammer and we had a couple of other options out there. And so we said, look, let's see what's out there. So we looked at Jive, we looked at Tibber, we looked at Socialcast, a handful of them. We did webinars and brought our pilot groups in to listen to the speech and hear what was going on. And eventually we ended up doing a bake-off. We ended up having a bake-off that ultimately Yammer won. But part of that proposal that we identified, where Yammer was kind of the bake-off winner, was we got legal behind us. So legal and security and risk were involved from the very beginning. Now, it doesn't mean they were happy, but they were involved. And they were able to ask questions and get us to think about concepts or ideas that we weren't necessarily thinking about. Now, the other thing is that at the time, we had a much different risk profile than we do now. And certainly laws have changed and whatnot, which has definitely changed the playing field. But ultimately, with their backing, with our network security's backing, we put a proposal together and we got buy-off, so make ESN, make an enterprise social network happen, and Yammer was the one. So officially in 2013, we signed a contract. Interestingly enough, that contract was written on Yammer paper even though Yammer was bought by Microsoft already, because the process took so long. But in 2013, we got the contract signed and started the preparations for having a global launch in May.
Thank you. So I just want to say good morning, and again, thank you for joining the session. As you can see, I'm British, and one of the words that Brits hardly ever use is the word awesome, but it's absolutely awesome to be at this conference and to share this journey for GSK with Joe. Does anyone know Verpi, the business illustrator? She does the little blue Yammer animated drawings. Some of you know, you've probably seen her work. She's done some really great stuff. She said to me when I first met her, because she lives in London. Sorry, I just got to get this moving a bit. Sorry. I've got too many things going on here. That's the one I want. She said to me, when she first met me at GSK, I invited her in to help me with some of the early work with Yammer. She said to me that you're operating like an intrapreneur. And I said, I've got no idea what you're talking about, so I Googled it. And I came back with the description of long-standing respected employee who behaves like an entrepreneur, an innovative, creative risk-taker, first to try something new without being asked, learns from failures, has the courage to think out of the box, helps companies grow, and has integrity. Integrity is everything. And I was like, wow, I can't believe that she thinks I've got some of those qualities. And I showed my boss, and he said, yes, that's you, but don't spend any money. Corporate comms has never got any budget. So he said, yeah, he goes, carry on what you're doing, but don't ask for any money. So my Yammer journey started in 2013 when a Facebook friend who worked in GSK IT comms told me it was, told me that the company were using this thing called Yammer and I should check it out, which was a bit like Facebook, but we mustn't say that. So at this point, GSK had a number of collaborative platforms. Joe's already mentioned some of them, but they were working in silos. Sorry. And he sent me a link, and I started to check it out, and I tried it. And within a few months, I'd made more connections on that network out of my own business area of manufacturing that I'd made in 19 years of being in that company. I was really becoming motivated and feeling really, really connected. But in 2013, I moved into corporate communications, into the digital team. I took my Yammer connections and know-how with me and started to extend the reach within the function. Now these entrepreneurial skills really started to come into play. But however, at this point, I was dealing mostly with old school command and control management red dots, who preferred a push, not pull management style of communicating, and the word collaborating had not actually been discovered there. In another role, in a previous life, I've been queen of horrific distribution lists for email cascades. This was still the preferred way of working for many organisations. It still is. So I had my work cut out, moving the yellow dots to the green dots. So I met Joe and his very buzzy, busy team on the network, and we soon started to unofficially work together, nurturing red dots to yellows to greens across the company. As Joe explained, we had a long, frustrating wait before Yammer became a permanent feature due to Microsoft buying Yammer and our own internal hurdles. However, this was firmed up, and my boss allocated 20% of my time. Sorry, I think I've moved to the wrong...
No, you're in the right place.
Sorry. But this picture has two reference points. Birds do it, bees do it, let's do it, Yammer. It's actually a new piece of work of mine, the correlation between ecosystems and enterprise social networks. Anyone been to Kew Gardens in London? Brilliant. There's, this picture is actually a installation at Kew at the moment that is wired up to a real beehive in the gardens. And it's showing how bees naturally communicate with each other. It's absolutely beautiful in there. It's a huge installation, and you can hear the noise of the bees, and it also lights up at the same time. So I'm doing this, this piece of work where it's showing how animals in the ecosystem actually start to actually communicate with each other, and the fact that human beings, we've kind of forgotten how to naturally communicate with each other, and still at work you're using email. So I'm working on that at the moment. I just thought I'd just mention it in passing. And if you want to look it up, it's called The Secret Life of Bees at Kew Gardens. It's a lovely thing. So, I've discovered my pain that acting like an intrapreneur can somewhat be uncomfortable in the early days. So checking my new thinking by working out loud is invaluable. So we had the global rollout, and this is where I started to really start working closely with Joe. I've been using the network for probably about 18 months. I was now in corporate communications and was given license to actually start doing things properly from a corporate level. So we worked together on the global rollout program. We were now about 20,000 employees at this point. So we had pretty much of a good base out of 100,000 employees in the company across, 120 countries, 60 or 70 manufacturing sites. And some of the events that we actually did for that launch, I'm going to hand back to Joe for this because you were really instrumental in this.
So we, as part of the launch, working really closely with corporate comms, we really took advantage of the installation that they had of people at various sites. So we, as I mentioned on a couple of slides previous, we did our rollout in May. And so the planning and everything was associated around getting us ready for the 31 days of Yammer. So utilizing the full month of May. So a lot of marketing, if you will, internal marketing that we put together, and I'm going to share some of the stuff that we used for that marketing, was all based on getting the word out and trying to get people to engage. One of the things we did in addition to the 31 days, we had the 24 hours of Yammer. So May 1st, which was, no, I thought it was May 5th because it was a work day. we started with some of our colleagues in the first time zone that came online, which happened to be in the Far East. I think it was in Singapore is where they came on. So we got some of them to take a picture of themselves yammering. And we had plants across the globe that did that. And so we ended up with pictures, more than 24, but lots of pictures going around the globe of people using Yammer, just as a way of drawing people in. Again, it was really just to make the activity happen. As part of the events, we had topics for each week where we focused on certain activities to try to get people to just stay engaged and to participate in the network. And ultimately, with Com's help, we put together a little advertising, which I'll share with you now.
I sometimes do it before a meeting.
We do it together on the streets.
I do it every day because I don't want to miss out.
I do it on the bus and no one knows I'm doing it.
I do it because it's a great source of knowledge.
We do it with other cyclists.
I'd just like to add that, it was groundbreaking kind of material for a pharmaceutical company. I'm surprised we got away with it. But we found out a couple of months later, I found out from one of the guys in Joe's team that the Japanese loved it, and they used subtitles and they played it over in Japan when they were launching Yammer, which they were doing off their own back. They weren't really getting any support for us. But I was absolutely stunned. I couldn't believe it. So it was, and the outtakes of that are hilarious. There's a lot of bad language. So.
Yeah, but as you can see, Yammy was around even then, right? So when in early installation, so Yammy and I got to pose for a picture. But if you may have seen at the end of that video, something that we're going to talk about a little bit later, which is anytime you do a campaign in Yammer, use a hashtag. Man, that gives you something to work about. Larry's shaking his head. He knows what we're talking about. So here's some more of the materials that we put together as part of our campaign. Again, just an idea. I'm not saying go do this, but this was just part of what we put together. We had these as pull-up banners that we posted in the various sites. Just again, get it in the face of people so they could see it when they were walking in the door. And really just trying to hit some of the highlights, as well as gives a couple of tips that could work, or that could maybe plant the seed for how it might work in different parts of the business.
Can I just add that there was no budget really?
Yeah,
there was hardly any budget. So this was done by some of the graduates.
Yeah, some of our students.
Had a very good eye, but there was no budget. We're trying to change the culture of the company on nothing, which they've managed to do. So.
We did, and it worked well. So other parts of the rollout are also really important, and I kind of want to mention those here. It's really key to get your stakeholders involved, and if you can identify that group of champions, we referred to them as the ambassadors. I didn't make it up. I stole it off the YCN. It was used a lot back then, and I think probably to me though, I'm most proud of the ambassadors. Picture over there, because change begins with your first post. It's just that simple. Just get started. And this was just part of what we did in terms of rolling it out. We created a Yam Tips group, which we utilized to put a lot of self-help, some videos, some just lists of things to try, notes of using the Yammer notes, so lots of information that they could just look at. A lot of material we took from Microsoft on the 5 steps to joining Yammer, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It changed from 4 to 5 while we were rolling it out. And we also, as part of the rollout, we actually got a video from the head of Microsoft welcoming us to the crowd, as it were. And so with all this was happening, it really worked. We did have a good rollout, and the growth continued. We also did things like Tip Tuesday. I would throw a new post out with, hey, have you tried this in Yammer before? And so those kinds of things really worked. They got a lot of likes. Marking content is official, makes it easy to refer to it, and then people who are in Yammer don't have to go somewhere else to find help. They can find the help within Yammer. So those were all really, really helpful pieces. Now you.
So at this point, we started to get quite well known on the Yammer, on the YCN, the Yammer customer network, and our kind of confidence was building, and we started to realise that we could share our knowledge and collaborate with companies outside our own network, which has never been done before for highly regulated industries. Are we allowed to talk like this? It was absolutely brilliant, the Yammer customer network. Me living in London, I was often invited to the Yammer Shoreditch office to share stories with other customers, move them along the journey that might be behind, especially other pharmaceutical companies. We were invited. I opened up the pharma group on the YCN. I thought I had to ask permission to do that. I was just said, no, they said just do it, see who wants to join. There's some other, pharma people within this group, and I think I ended up with about 8 pharmaceutical companies in a Yammer network with me, which I just thought, this is bizarre and brilliant and awesome. We got invited by our CSM to do a Yam Jam for pharma, which Joe and I did that first Yam Jam, and we learned a lot from the CSMs that supported us. And then I had this mad idea to actually do a Yam Jam within GSK for the first time. I'd heard from, again, a serendipity comment on the YCM from another big company. I think it was Reckitt and Benzik had done a Yam Jam for the end of year financial results. And so I brought that back to my team and said, do you think we should try this? So eventually, with my entrepreneurial savvy, I persuaded them, and it went really, really well. And then that's been repeated, and Joe's going to tell you how that's been taken to another level in the last couple of months. We also arranged a knowledge share with Diageo at this time around our intranet and around the use of Yammer. And unfortunately, Diageo are presenting right at this moment, because we would have loved to have come to each other's session. There's just too much going on at the same time. Oh.
Does everybody know what a Yam Jam is? Do you want to maybe quickly...
Yeah, sorry. That's a great question. Thank you. Thank you very much for asking that question, of course. Not everyone, you're here to, understand and learn more. So, yeah, a Yam Jam is usually a dedicated hour on the network. It can be done in a number of ways. You could do it in a set group. It can be the whole network. But you bring together your subject matter experts around a particular subject. So for this case, for the end of year results, and we chose to do it after the results were in the public domain, after the stock exchange announcements, and most of the employees in the company were shareholders. So they really know about, they're all subject matter expert. They're all looking at the share price. It was very, very meaningful. So we brought together people from corporate communications and from finance. There was about 6 experts all together. We had a war room. Joe's really expert. So we bring them all together, try and have them all in one place. If they're not all in the same country, bring them in on a webinar. And you just all sit together. There's usually some seeded questions, maybe about 8 questions that you've put out to some trusted ambassadors to pop them up over that hour to keep the conversation going. But we've got MVPs here, and I'm sure they've all run Yam Jams. But what we can do maybe after this session is put something up and remind everyone about Yam Jams. Microsoft have documented it all as well. But it's a fantastic thing to do with corporate communications for employee engagement too. But Joe will talk more about actually the brilliant Yam Jams that he's doing now. Where's my clicker? Here we go. So I joined the Yammer party, as you heard, a little bit late. This is quite a long story. So I came in at 2012, and as I said, we had about 20,000 members at this point. And we created this IT partnership. And over the space of over 2 years, we grew the network up to over 50,000, up to 50,000 by the end of 2014. And I spotted the number creeping up, and I said to my boss in comms and to Joe, this is a good number. From what I'm hearing from the YCN, we should celebrate, we should share some of the amazing stories that we're aware of. So we gathered together it's quite funny how this came about with the number of stories. We told Yammer that we were doing this, and they gave us 10 big bags of swag. So we decided, well, we're going to look for potentially that amount of stories. So between Joe and my awareness of what was going on the network, we tried to look for some really strong stories. And pure luck, really, the stories that bubbled up were from right across the enterprise. There were stories from R&D, IT, from manufacturing sites, from sales and marketing. There were stories from corporate communications around our big fundraising for Save the Children, which goes right across the company. The stories as well weren't so much about, they were about the business, but they were actually about the people that owns the groups, the group owners, the community managers. That's what really came to the front of this. So there was people who were really aligned to the strategy of the company and were making huge inways to move the company forward by the use of Yammer and how they were driving it forward with these really quite strategic groups. And also, so I suddenly realised I was coming up with all these stories between the partnership, and I thought, well, we've got to put them somewhere. So I said to the editorial team in comms, what am I going to do with these stories? And my boss looked at me and he said, these are priceless, and you'll see I'll share the format that I've developed building up these stories. And I think I nearly fainted when they said to me, we can put it under the GSK strategy on the homepage of the intranet, because we haven't put anything there for a while. It probably could do with a bit of a refresh. And this is about, in a way, this is about people. This is about people in the company, not the management that have made this all happen. So it's people development as well. And so it was also, I reminded the owners of the recipients of the swag, the group maintainers. I said, you must put this on your PDP, on your personal development plans, and bring it up with your bosses at the end of the year. And they were like, oh yeah, but when can we have the swag? It seemed to be more important to them. So this is the formula that I developed at that time. And it's using a qualitative and quantitative and quote approach. So it's kind of like the triple Q. And it needs to have, it's got an objective, a plan, an outcome, a scope. It's got to have a priceless leader quote. That leader might not be that engaged in that network, but to get the quote that he's aware of it, he might be lurking in the background. And that is what creates this Yammer magic. And in case I forget to say it, Yammer Magic hashtag on Twitter, I have documented all of the stories since I've left the company as part of going out to be a consultant. If you search Yammer Magic on Twitter, but you'll also find some of the other MVP stories as well, because they started using the hashtag Yammer Magic. And they cover, as I've already said, R&D, manufacturing, commercial, there was HR stories, there's finance, they're all there. And it has truly been supporting the GSK mission of do more, feel better, live longer. But at this point, we'd just got over the 50,000, and you would think, way, we're there, it's all going great. But we actually started to we'd reached tipping point. It had become sustainable, but cracks started to appear in my egg. And that is my photograph. And when I was taking the photograph, the egg fell on the floor and it did smash. But then I just thought, actually, that works quite well. So I'm going to hand back to, this is where, sorry, I'm not going to hand back to Joe. I'm going to come back again. So I've actually, at this point, I'd been in GSK for 24 years, which is like, oh my God. So I thought my work was done. I'd hit upon a new thing, the future of work, Yammer was regarded as a success within the company now. We'd proved it with these brilliant stories from across the enterprise. And I decided that Yammer was not just for Christmas, it's for life. And as is the working out loud, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more shortly, but it becomes part of your DNA. And working in this way, you can't go back. And I know my fellow Yammer MVPs all feel this passionately. So I now run Yammer adoption workshops for a Microsoft Gold partner in the UK called Perspicuity. So anyway, I'm going to hand back to Joe. And meanwhile, at GSK,
So not only did Leslie leave, but we also had a couple of other things happen.
can
at
I just
GSK.
add one thing there that I didn't say? Sorry.
No.
There was one thing I forgot to add. And they were reorganising the IT function and the comms function. So I was actually being pulled back from doing this thing that I wanted to carry on supporting the company out of communications, all the comms team. So it was a function of 400 people in communications, all aligned to the different functions. That's how I was getting to everyone. And we were being told, no, everyone knows where it is. We want you to do other things. I was being pulled back to do things that I didn't really want to do again, and it was, I found it boring. And that was partly the reason why I left. Sorry. Sorry.
Absolutely. But it actually does hit on the point,
Yeah.
which is lots of change was happening, which unfortunately I would say now, the old adage, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Yeah, we broke it. That's really what happened. So not only was there the change that Leslie referred to with respect to the comms perspective, again, because they were our primary sponsor for making this whole endeavor happen, from an IT perspective, we changed. So the team that I was on during the rollout and preparing, we were about a 6-person team, a good connection with comms. We did a reorganization, and those 6 people were pushed back into different parts of IT, and I was left with Yammer, and I was the only one doing Yammer. Now they were all still supporting, when they could, but they all had a different focus now. So my role became just Yammer. And so all of the things that my team was doing, talking to the various business units, as Leslie was mentioning, going out and finding out what their pain points are and how could Yammer help them, that was all coming to me. But the problem was I couldn't go find them because you can only be stretched so far, right? So I was forced to pull back and rely on, word of mouth, to be fair. I've got a lot of good customers that have had successful groups, and they would tell people, hey, if you got a question, go talk to the Yammer guy. Who's the Yammer guy? That's me. Many of you may wear that same hat, but definitely I'm the Yammer guy at GSK.
I was Yammer Nana.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. So, right in there.
Sorry.
So just the approach that we had just completely changed. And comms approach was changing, our approach changed. So we weren't failing by any stretch, but the large growth, we grew really quickly. As Leslie mentioned, we got to that 50,000 point. It really slowed down. We never stopped growing. And by growing, I mean in terms of number of members, number of posts. If you look at just those real measures, those hard measures, those never stopped, but the rate of increase did decline. So that was part of part of the problem. Also because of what I was doing, and it was I was doing it at the time, there was less that we could do. So trying to figure out new ways of making things work, or finding other things to look at to make Yammer better, we just couldn't do those. So one of the big ones, and I've shared with a few people today, is that from a metrics perspective, we haven't invested in doing metrics. Metrics are done by Joe. And I do a data extract and do some massaging, and then I produce 150, 200 spreadsheets. Don't recommend it. Absolutely not. So, and that's why, some of the things that we've seen this week, the community insights is going to be huge, I think. And also the third-party solutions that are out there are really helpful. If you can make that investment, I encourage you to do that. But also things like just administrative things I couldn't focus on. We had a lot of what I'll call chaff in our groups. Lots of groups that, even though we had a policy, I didn't have anything but a manual way of cleaning them out, right? And so I'm better than that now, but it just took a while. But so in figuring these things out, I was able to, slowly, but we were able to make some things happen. So first of all, Yammer became part of 0365, as you guys are all now know. And ultimately, we had to make the change so that we took advantage of the 0365 profiles. And so now, instead of syncing our user community from our on-premise AD. Now we sync them from AAD. We enabled single sign-on, which is now connected to all of O365. So our single sign-on solution now means you can get in and get to every solution. We also, so I mentioned a couple slides back, we had legal on board, but they did have questions. They did have things that they wanted us to address. One of them was content retention. And that was something that, as clearly, you still cannot do with Yammer. You have to do something external. But in this time of slow growth and one person, we found a solution. One of the third-party vendors, Wiretap, we finally hooked up, and they had a solution that we could use. And so that has really been huge and has been a blessing in disguise for us at this point, because now our content, we only keep essentially a year's worth of active content in Yammer. So from a personal perspective, I disagree, but that's Joe's perspective because I think it's communal knowledge, but from a corporate perspective, it's 100% accurate, and I get it. I absolutely get it. So it's protecting the organization. And so the other things that we did, that we were able to do were, again, just trying to stem the tide. What can we do to try to make that increase a little bigger like it used to be? Just different things like putting together some rules on how to have a successful group, right? And just things that you could refer to, that self-help, if you will, that's repeatable. Telling people about how they could bulk load people into groups. That was huge. All of a sudden, the jaws dropped because they realized they can do that. In my location, and we've now started using it in a couple of other locations, the office that I'm in, we've got open floor plan. And on the entrance to my office area, we've got a big video monitor. And that video monitor shows a Yammer feed for our particular group, our site group. But it's not a Yammer feed, it's a feed from another third party. It's called Streaming It Out Loud from Many Worlds. We've used that, and it's easy, and it looks good. There's another solution called Feedfall that people could use, which also has a lot of the same characteristics, and it also does really well. We just had Streaming It Out Loud before Feedfall was available for us to use, so that's just kind of the way it worked. But the nice thing about that endeavor that I had been doing kind of just to help my own site and some of the other sites become more successful, more engaged with Yammer, is it allowed us to then make a next step. And that was, finally got comms re-engaged. Now, let me tell you what made comms re-engaged. We got a new CEO. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. We got a new CEO, and as part of the transition for our new CEO, they put together an incredibly powerful campaign. And instead of being focused on the company portal or trying to get connected to our mobile users, they were trying to now re-engage internal staff on using the solutions that we had. So
they took all our advice that we had been banging on
you
about.
plant the seed.
Yeah.
You plant the seed, absolutely. So finally they came back. And so getting a new CEO has really allowed us to get pushed back over the top. So up to this point, we were at about 75,000 users. So this was as of about the end of last year. As part of this campaign, we did a few things within Yammer to kind of help make things come together. So staff, we created a new group called Let's Talk, and we encouraged people to use the Let's Talk hashtag. And the point of the group and the point of the hashtag was for staff to ask questions, make comments, with the expectation that the new management team was going to see them and respond. And the key here is they responded. If you don't have them respond, it's useless, but they have responded. So that was really huge. It's that, many of you have probably heard it or seen it, having that leadership engagement, that's what did it. Absolutely did it. And so now I can see in this group, our CEO has made a post or multiple posts. Her directs have made posts. So now, instead of having this groundswell of Yammer use here and here, now it's at all levels. That's really big. They are, in fact, CEO -2, that group of people. They're getting together next week. And all the preparation for that meeting and the conversations that are occurring during that meeting are happening in a private Yammer group for those groups. So it's make them feel like they can't break it, because they can't, and hopefully you can get them to go. So it really worked. Now, well, the driver of all of this was, as I mentioned, this campaign, and how it came to pass is we actually modified our corporate homepage in our internal portal, and we put a Yammer feed. So Yammer Embed, highly recommend, and the new version too when it's available. But we use Yammer Embed, and we embedded the thread for the hashtag Let's Talk on the homepage. And that was huge. It was really huge because it did two things. Number one, now that it's on the portal, anytime somebody went to the portal, if they weren't a Yammer user, they had to create themselves. They had to log in and create an identity in order to see the content. And it was a really in-your-face, let me see it kind of thing. So every time you went to the homepage, you either were reading it, so you were engaging, or you were created so you could engage. So that was a kind of a little aside there. The reason that users had to be created is because at GSK we do not pre-create Yammer accounts. You join Yammer because you want to join Yammer. So not everybody takes that approach, but that has worked for us. That way, we know if you're there, it's because you want to be there. So really important. So, and to the point that this thread that's now on the homepage, or that was on the homepage, conversations Leslie mentioned one about a PDP, or professional development plan, or personal development plan, excuse me. One of the things that happens at GSK, and probably most of your companies as well, is each year, based on how you do in your PDP, you get a rating and potentially financial adjustments based on those ratings. Oftentimes, the distribution of that allotment is predetermined, or based on rules that you don't really have any control over. The thread was created in the Let's Talk group talking about this process and how many believed it was not accurate and certainly didn't reflect the values of GSK. That thread reached over 300 posts. It got to the point where people, when they went to the corporate homepage, if they didn't go directly into Yammer, when they went to the corporate homepage, they began to think that no content was changing because the same thread was always visible in the Yammer part. It was always the same conversation. But in that 300 posts, there were minimal repeats. In other words, they were all by individuals. They were from people from every business unit and every geography. Management listened. They haven't given the answer I want yet. Sorry about that. They haven't given the answer I want yet, but they have promised to provide an update. They are going to make a change. It's already under review. We don't know what that will be, but it means they're listening, and that was the most important part. And they posted back that they're listening, and here's their plan to address. So again, having that leadership feedback and closing the loop, really, really huge. People were encouraged to post their pictures using the Let's Talk frame. You've seen these frames for all over the place. This was, I don't know who that guy is, but they get posted all over the time, but our engagement really did jump. The next thing that we did, and the question for the Yam Jam was really apropos, because what we also did is in association with this year's financial results at the end of Q2, we put together corporate comms put together a video stream. So our corporate executive team, they came together to talk about and to share the results with staff. So they did a UK morning and a US morning live video. It was taped in the London Stock Exchange. It was like a news broadcast because they used like 4 different of the rooms, and cameras switched from each location to interview different people. One of those rooms was the war room. And in the war room, that's where we had a team of comms and one of my guys that were helping to manage the threads in Yammer, because that's where the questions were coming from. So they would go to the war room, show a picture of the people working, and then they had the Yammer feed up on the screen, and they would pull the question, and it would get addressed by one of the people on the panel, one of the corporate executives. Really, really cool. For those who weren't there, because since it was done in the London Stock Exchange, people like me, we were redirected to a website which showed the video and the Yammer stream. In this particular case, this video was coming from our broadcast, our internal broadcast system that we use, and then the Yammer feed on the right is from streaming it out loud. So it's all on one page, seamless. It all worked really well. And so you could see the video, watch and hear the video, and you could see the Yammer conversations that were going up. So this Let's Talk Live campaign was huge as a great follow-on. So the Yammer change, the CEO transition piece started in April. As part of that transition, I mentioned the placement on the webpage and that sort of thing. Our membership grew by 23,000 members in 2 weeks because it was in your face. It was in your face. And so now where that has us is we have on our network over 100,000 members. I can tell you when I first started with Yammer, my expectation was that if you look at round numbers, I'd say GSK's got 100,000 people in AD. Based on the fact that we have manufacturing sites and we've got sales people that are remote, I'm going to guess we're going to get 75% penetration. That's what I guessed way back when. We're pretty close to 100%. And if we look at that on a rotating monthly basis, we're getting between 35 and 40% engagement. And to me, that's spectacular. And if for no other reason that I know that it's not the same 30, 35,000, 40,000 people, because it's all context-based. As we know, with Yammer engagement, you might engage on something or you might just be a reader, depending on what the topic is. You probably, the 1990 concept, hopefully you all heard that. For any given topic, you're going to have 1% of your population that's going to be creating content, 9% responding to it, and 90% just consuming it, that 1990 piece. And that's really been true for GSK. And I'm really proud of the fact that not only that number, because the number of members is cool, but to me the bigger thing is, look at our distribution. We have membership from every business unit, and corporately we're in like 150 countries. We've got representation in Yammer from 127. That just astounds me every time I look at it. Now, the US and the UK are our primary leaders. That's where most of the staff are. But if you look at the top 20 countries that we have membership from, that represents about 80% of our, if you take the top 20, it's about 80% of the population in Yammer. So that was, how did we get over the plateau? That's what happened. And some of the things that allowed us to get there, we were doing, and Leslie was doing them outside. And this is where she's going to tell you a little bit about some of her things.
Thank you. Could you move the notes down? Thank you. That's why I get the pick up. Now, this is what I really like talking about. I did struggle with the earlier part because that was me trying to remember 4 years ago on how I got into Yammer. And it's taken me weeks to remember the ins and outs of how I got so engrossed in the Yammer network at GSK, which feels like it was quite a long time ago now. But I'm going to talk about an approach around strategy, around the training. I'm just going to talk briefly about the training, the coaching, the mentoring that was going on in GSK around Lean Six Sigma. Does anyone know what Lean Six Sigma is? Put a few hands up. Great. Okay, some of you in here know, so I don't have to go into it too much. You can Google it. The rest of you can Google it later on. So build and they will come. It's not a strategy, it's a prayer. So next slide. And this is about digital transformation. We're in this for the long game. We all know that. And I wanted to get a nice picture about the long game. And I came up with this quote by Satya, if you just want to quickly have a read. I just thought it was quite a neat quote to put in at this conference. So this is the framework that I've been developing, and I started this when I was at GSK, out of my Lean Six Sigma training. And so this is what I call my holistic Yammer change management framework. And Lean Six Sigma taught me how to work more efficiently and effectively and cut out wasteful ways of working, which has come out of the manufacturing production line ways of working, because that's where I spent the first 15 years of working at GSK. So it was part of the language that they were all talking. So this is, it's known, there's tweets about it all over the place about hashtag rolling, because I've been referring to it for the last 2 years. But it's demonstrating 4 important facets in the outer quadrants that make up a successful Yammer network. But at the center of the network, if I was to say who were the Yammer founding fathers, who would you say they are? Anyone know? Who were the Yammer founding fathers? Adam Pisoni and... Yes. And I think it was Adam that describes Yammer as the DNA of an organisation, and I think that's absolutely beautiful. So if you come out of go into the top quadrant, we talk about, because this is also what, why, and how, this model as well. So it's talking about why Yammer. And have you heard of Working Out Loud? And who's the founding father of Working Out Loud? Yeah, so I'm a big follower of an evangelist of John's work, but that phrase was actually developed. They created it. He created it with someone else, and that was Bryce Williams at Pfizer. Apparently they went to a workshop, and I think it was Bryce that said, hey, working out loud, and then John took it to another level. So working out loud, I'm gonna read from my notes here, but it's about building relationships, it's discovering knowledge with a growth mindset, and generously recognizing great work and making work visible, which is often unfinished, seeking feedback to approve it. I've shared this model all over the place, and just changing one tiny word and everything can make such a difference. So you need to be working out loud. You need to be demonstrating those principles on your network to make it sing, and that's what's going on at GSK and MVP's networks that are in this room. So on the left side is what are the problems we're trying to fix. It's about strategy alignment. You need to bring in here senior leadership is important. This is what Joe's already said about the change of CEO. Things change near enough overnight, but it's about participation that makes the network sing. One like by a senior leader on a post can be absolutely huge employee engagement, just one like. Using Yammer for big announcements and events with a strong hashtag that we've already talked about. And as Joe's mentioned, measuring and sharing network statistics back to the network regularly is very important too. And sharing clear, concise, qualitative and quantitative stories with leader quotes. And I'm going to go a little bit more deeper into that in a second. And on the right is how we do things around here. So Yammer is your cultural DNA. It's your behaviours and values. It's owned by human beings, and it's sharing tacit knowledge. Champions are essential, but ensure they are real, and champions are not just elected by you. Allow a mixture of fun and work. I was supporting a lot of strategic groups, but I was heavily involved in the cycling group, in the photography group. There was some fun stuff going on there all the time. I like a bit of fun. And reward innovative use. See where most unusual answers come from, and this is where you'll find your natural entrepreneurs of deep in the business areas, in middle management, and maybe even lower, those trusted, hard-working employees that have been in the company a long time. And then we go into the bottom quadrant, so where is the business value? And I love a model by Simon Terry over there. Give us a wave. Hello, MVP and Working Out Loud guru with John Stepper. Simon's model talks about beyond adoption to value creation, and it's connecting, sharing, solving, and innovating. And it's it's embedding Yammer and integrating Yammer now through Office 365 as a fast flow of information that's in your SharePoint, in your processes, your systems, and your tasks. When I was still at GSK, I shared the first iteration of this model with the EA comms team. One of my sessions where I was trying to nurture Yammer. And a couple of weeks after that meeting, one of the girls contacted me. She emailed me, and she told me that the German Works Council had previously banned the use of Yammer, but they saw my model, and they've now approved it. I think I fell off my chair. I couldn't believe that had happened. I was really hugely pleased. And one more thing, just the last thing about this model is the shape of the model. So what is the shape if you take out all the words? It's a hashtag. So it's my hashtag Woland model. Thank you very much. So it's a big hashtag to emphasize tagging or topics which have been raised in importance this week because there's new developments going on around the use of topics, which I'm really, really pleased about because I'm a huge fan of tags. You can't find anything on Twitter without looking for the hashtag. And it's a shame because he's just left the room. Stowe Boyd was in the room who 10 years ago invented or developed, brought forward and discovered the purpose and the use of hashtags. But he's helped me with this model over the last few years. But it's the importance of hashtagging and using topics within your network as well. And those topics and those tags, it's thinking about your company buzzwords. So around what are the problems you're trying to fix? You could be using things like product, KPI, customers, product brand names, and then on the right it could be things like spotlighting innovation, maybe fundraising, advocacy and diversity in the company. But the other thing I was pleased to see this week from the Yammer team was the outer and the inner aspects of using Yammer and Teams, because actually it works quite well across my model. So we've got Yammer is the outer loop, and then Teams probably could sit to the left, which is the inner one around strategy and alignment. But the beauty of Yammer is it's the culture of your company. Teams is not going to be the culture of your company. You might feel it a bit, but you're going to get the people elements and serendipity going on around Yammer. So I was really pleased to see that. And I must say, I think it's the inner and the outer. I think it's, for me, it's now called I'm thinking of it as the belly button, the innie and the outie. You want to take that away. So. Right, and there's my other model that I use in my workshops. So next one, thank you, is Yammer Community Manager skill sets. And I call this my 6 Yammer hats, which I got that analogy from Edward de Bono's 6 parallel thinking hats. Who's heard of Edward de Bono's? So they're top hats, different colours, and you can use it within a team to focus your thinking. If you all put a yellow hat on, you start thinking more creatively. I can't remember the ins and outs of it. So I've developed that and used and built up my 6 Yammer hats. I think all the MVPs, whatever they're doing, are demonstrating these skills, but the Yammer MVPs have got to be doing this, and they've got to be doing it using entrepreneurial skills as well. Can I take your question in a second? Thank you. So the first hat is the detective. This is capturing voice of the employees, and I think the detective hat is more in private groups. The surveyor hat, which could then be opened into and made public groups, because you might have brilliant subject matter experts in there, but maybe when they start off, they might want to be doing a bit of deep diving detective research. And then the surveyor hat is probably more of a comms role, where it's asking the enterprise-wide, asking questions, putting out polls. It's more of that kind of looking around all over the place. And then the astronaut hat is probably more the community manager. And I've put in there Simon Terry's connect, share, solve, and innovate, those brilliant 4 words. And then the Fedora is going to be corporate communications, where I was working, and you're looking for stories that the usual folks in comm might never see. So it's the worker bees that are maybe in factories that might be using this, in sales teams, and you're looking for grassroots stories that the comms team will probably never even hear about. And I often heard some brilliant stories, posts going on in Yammer, and I would point it out to the comms team, and they would then investigate it, and a couple of times they ended up as corporate stories. And then there's the tiara for giving praise. So that could be just a like, because I've already mentioned the power of a like is just a wonderful thing from someone higher up than you. And then the baseball cap for having fun with a purpose. You can have a real giggle on the network, and now they've got the GIFs and kind of emoticons and everything. You can have some real fun with it. So I think that was everything I wanted to say about that slide, wasn't it? But this is my real stuff I like talking about. I hate talking about stuff that happened 4 years ago. I really stumbled on that, so I am sorry.
So that kind of moves us on to what I'll call my nuggets. So little nuggets to share with you guys. Hopefully they can work for you. They mostly worked for us. It's certainly the big ideas here is, we've talked about many of these, engaging legal and risk early. Have a policy, have a plan on what your employees can use and how they can use it, and have some teeth, and so that if you have people that have made a post that they shouldn't have, or are using Yammer in a way that they shouldn't be using it, you do something. Make sure you follow through on it. We really rely still today on communal policing, simply meaning that I'm not out there monitoring to see what's happening, but if somebody tells me that there's a post that should be addressed, we'll look at it. But the first thing I'm going to say to them is, have you asked the user, the poster, to get rid of it? You are empowered to make that happen. So that's definitely something that we rely on. I think one of the big things early on that we had that was a problem, and I know that many of you who are using Yammer already know that, is the company feed is so noisy. So noisy. So figure out how to use your filters. Choose following, or discovery is great for some, but it drives me insane because I don't want to see all that stuff. So make sure that you've got some understanding and you share some guidance with with staff on what's there. If you can, pre-create some groups. Not necessarily populate them, but pre-create and use that as part of your awareness campaign for where you want people to have different conversations. And by all means, if conversations are occurring in groups that are off topic, ask them to be moved, ask the poster to move that to a different group. It really makes a lot of sense and definitely helps. And as I mentioned with our Let's Talk campaign, integrating Yammer into something is really a positive. So I highly encourage any kind of integration that you can do, whether it's just with, a video board or putting it on your portal. Any kind of integration helps put it in front of people, definitely. Some of the things that helped us drive adoption are listed here. And I mentioned a couple of these in passing, but so we have our group, we call the Yam Tips group. Some of the documents or the posts that we have in the Yam Tips group really focus on these things. And so we do have, I used to call it the good and great things. So there were 10 good things and 10 great things. And they're all easy. I mean, we've mentioned some of them. Just like a post. That makes a lot of things happen. That's one of those things that can really go. Just ask a question. And one of the beautiful things about Yammer is it gives you the opportunity to find people who know things. You don't know until you ask. And the great thing is that person who knows whatever it is you're looking for, may not be looking at Yammer right then, so they may not see the question, but chances are good somebody who knows him has seen it and they'll make it happen. So it's that, the serendipity piece absolutely works. Taking advantage of embed is definitely good, definitely important. And this plan for success item I have here, that's a document that we created. It's really just kind of 4 things. Why do you want to make the group? Have a purpose. Who's your target audience? What do you want to accomplish? What's your goal? And how do you know if you did it or not? What's your measure? It's really pretty simple, but when you can create a group as easily as you can in Yammer, just by clicking a button and putting in a name that's not invalid or already been used, anybody can create a group, but they may be the only person in that group, and there may be no conversations because they don't realize it. So having a purpose, having a plan on how to be successful really goes a long way. Managing the environment for us and for everybody, I think, is hugely important. We definitely took advantage of the AD Sync, so we used the on-prem AD Sync tool until they wouldn't let us use it anymore, and then a little bit longer. And now we're using the sync through AAD. Again, really helpful for us. The things that we were able to do, I mentioned before, now we have a janitor, which we didn't have before. Thank goodness we do, and my legal team is much happier now. The community that's out there, Leslie's mentioned the MVPs, group of people that we used to have in the YCN, and now there's a Yammer Tech community, and Googling anything that you can find as a tool to help, I promise you, don't hide it, don't lose it, because it will come back and be helpful. I have finally found through lots of searching and then being able to pull things together, I've now got a PowerShell script that I can remove groups. I don't have to manually do it or get one of my students to just keep clicking. The first time that we had to do it, I couldn't figure out how to do it. What I was going to do was create an Internet Explorer macro, just a screen macro, because there were so many that we had to do. Now I can do it with a script. I can also have scripts that punch out group membership. I have scripts that do various things like that. Those become really powerful when you're a single person managing your network, for sure. So those are the kind of the things that I would leave you with. We have time now for questions. But before you ask any questions, and if you do have questions, there's a mic here in the middle. If you would please come to the mic so they can get it recorded. You stayed this long, so now you have a treat. I mentioned to you that Yammy came to our site during our rollout. One of the things that Yammy did when Yammy came to our site was Yammy did Dance Dance Revolution. Now, if you can get today's Yammy to do this, more power to you. But happy to take any questions now if there are any.
Hi, how much time do you have to spend to keep the network running?
It's a great question. For me, it's one of the things that I did when I became the Yammer guy, if you will, is I changed my way of working. So first thing I do in the morning is I look at Yammer rather than email. Having the network running, thankfully it's a cloud service, so it is almost always up. I mean, it's probably at 99% availability. And if there is a problem with the service, outages or lack of responsiveness are usually pretty quickly resolved. So from that aspect, I don't have to do much. The fact that we have been in place for so long also means that a lot of the things like addressing content issues, like if somebody's posted something they shouldn't, those get handled relatively quickly, unless they use our internal escalation process, and then I've got to deal with 6 emails from legal on this, and then that takes a little bit of time. To be quite honest, the thing that I spend the most amount of time on, the 2 things I spend the most amount of time on now are working with teams to help them understand what they can use Yammer for. So it's that sell, right? What's your pain point and how can you use Yammer to help you address that pain point? I probably have three meetings a week with teams on that, just helping them understand how to do that Yammer group plan for success. 30-minute, 40-minute meetings, and I'll show them how to use the bulk upload to put the members in, and then bang, they're off.
And do you have...
I'm sorry. Then the final thing is doing metrics. You heard me describe kind of my process. That takes me an elapsed full day, pretty much, to go through that. So that's my.
Do you some kind of monitor what's posted to the network? I mean, if request needed from some top management or some, I know that you have this hashtag, but maybe some monitoring is also needed. of the content?
I'm not sure. I don't think I heard enough of that to answer the question. Could you try that last part again, please? I didn't quite understand.
So, I mean, do you monitor what kind of posts are coming?
Yeah, so sorry, I understand. So one of the things about our corporate use policy for Yammer is based on the data classifications that we use internally, Yammer is appropriate for confidential content, but not highly confidential content. So that's one of those rules going in, and if anybody sees something that's posted that falls into that highly confidential area, whoever finds it can ask them to take it down, or they'll escalate it to have that taken down. Since I took over at managing the network in 2013, I've had to pull 4 posts, maybe. That is really not that much, because people operate with integrity. It's part of our values, so we really don't have many issues with that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You can add keyword monitoring as well within your Yammer network. So if there are words like that you don't want, like merger or whatever it is that you're looking at, you can actually surface that, and then leveraging analytics, you can also do word cloud. We've done word clouds on all our posts and dump our data just to see what's being talked about.
Right.
So there's different ways that you can definitely do it within your Yammer network.
Completely agree, yeah.
Hi. You mentioned your executives are pretty engaged on the network, on the Yammer, and the CEO is posting information. Could you say that Yammer is now the main news channel within GSK? And if yes, how do you integrate with others, like standard news on the internet, intranet, or?
So the easy way to answer that is to say no.
So it's not.
It's not. So Yammer is not about news, it's about conversation.
So you don't position that for, let's
correct.
say, new product launch and everybody
We definitely advertise. So if there are events going on, we will absolutely advertise them and refer people back to our news portal, our internal news about whatever the event is, like the Let's Talk campaign that I showed you. There we had a lot of content and then reference people to news posts in our company portal. But the focus of Yammer is not to be the corporate voice, but to be the customer's voice, or to be the user's voice.
Yeah.
All right. So when the CEO launches a new product, he's not looking for getting let's say comments through Yammer. He's just announcing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hey, my question is for Leslie. You had mentioned that you had a bunch of great success stories, and I'm the community manager for a large biotech company, and so one of my things is always trying to find these amazing, I know that there's amazing things in there, but I don't have all day long to search for them. So are there any tips on our network is like 30,000 people right now, we're gonna creep up. Like, how do I find those stories in such a big pile of?
Well, the communications team should be supporting you with that.
Yeah, I'm on the communications team.
Right.
They are,
right. But then it's, I suppose it's going back out and putting the word out that you're looking for some great stories.
Yeah.
Ask them. Mm-hmm. Don't kind of do the detective bit, do the surveyor bit.
Okay.
Put that hat on and go out there and actually ask them. But we want to hear your great stories. We know that it's going well. Maybe
like ask on Yammer or ask in a different forum?
There was a slide. I missed a slide.
Yes to both.
I missed a slide, and I'll show you the.
I have asked my champions. Yeah, we have a big champions group. Yeah, ours is called Yam Success, but yeah.
That's it.
The questions, the qualitative questions.
It's just there's all these like little corners I don't know how to get into.
And also leveraging analytics.
It's not there, Leslie.
There it is.
Word clouds and things that you can do to be able to surface some of the
There was more here. So it was the objective is what is the problem? The questions that you can ask them. There's questions under here. You just flip through it. So the format I was using was what is the problem your group was trying to fix? Why was it important to fix it? Under plan, which strategy or project did your group align to? Which behaviours and values did your group demonstrate? The outcome, how would you have fixed it in the past without a Yammer group? What did your group do that wasn't possible before? What were the benefits of this to the people involved in the organisation? Was there anything that you would do differently?
Okay,
So
and
I
that's
could
in
give
here?
you those questions if you want them.
Sure,
I
yeah.
could, if you,
Sure.
yeah. But that was the framework I was using, and then the great leader quote, and then the quantitative bit is how many people are in the group, where were they based. So you've got this framework, but yeah, I skipped that, sorry. But yeah, we're connect.
Do we have time for one last question?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to know how you guys train your people on how to use Yammer and what was the impact on adoption?
Yeah, so for my...
Without budget.
Yeah, exactly. So from my perspective, if you have to train somebody on Yammer, you haven't done your job. Because Yammer is just there. You just use it. What we do, so what we do instead is I do info sessions. We did lunch and learns where there was a little bit of guidance on what to click and where, right? So there was a little bit of that, but it was more focused on why you would use it rather than how you use it, if that makes sense. So we did a lot of lunch and learns. A lot of those conversations I mentioned that I have with teams now are, okay, Joe, we have this group, now what do I do with it? And so it's, okay, now these are the things you can do. Here's the types of ways you can try to engage your community, ask a question, post a picture, that kind of thing. So, but the actual mechanics of click here, then click here, then click here, the only mechanical piece that I really focus on is updating your profile to adjust notifications to the way that you want them to be, not the way Microsoft wants them to be. Because by default, you get a notification about everything, and that's annoying. And I follow that up with encouraging people to create a rule in their inbox that takes the email they get from Yammer and put it into a folder. That way, they can deal with Yammer when they want to deal with Yammer, and they can deal with their inbox when they want to deal with, as they typically do. Does that help? I'm sorry. Okay. Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.